All right. Well, welcome into the kitchen, everybody. I'm Bradley from Wild Food Outdoors, and we're here in Roseburg, Oregon with Hunt League and the On Point Experience with the winner, Cody. We're really excited to be getting into some bear meat preparation today. We're going to be canning some bear meat for some bear cheesesteak sandwiches later this week during the hunt. So we're going to get in here and kind of walk through the process a little bit. We've canned some bear before. This will be your first time canning, so we're just going to kind of talk through the process, what we're doing with the meat, what we're doing with the equipment, and how we're prepping this up to be used in a variety of different recipes. So super excited about it. We're just going to dive into it here. With bear meat, obviously, if you're not eating your bear meat, you're missing out. So first things first, take all the bear meat that you can. It's delicious. Absolutely eat your bear meat. Of course, everybody is concerned about trichinosis, and it is a concern, but it's easily handled through the canning process, and that's one of the big benefits of canning your bear meat is you don't have to worry about trichinosis at all. The science says that you need to cook it to at least 160 degrees, and we'll be doing that easily with the canning process. We'll be getting it up to 190, maybe a little bit over that for about 90 minutes. So there's absolutely zero concern about trichinosis. If you want to learn more about that stuff, Google's your friend. You can get into the nitty-gritty details. But for the purposes of this video and canning, nothing to worry about. You're going to need a few things to get started with canning your bear meat. Obviously, you're going to need a pressure canner, and that's what we got over here. We're rocking the Presto, I think it's a 23 quart pressure canner. This is really common. You'll see it in a lot of stores, and it does need to be a pressure cooker. That's very important. That's how you're going to achieve the correct temperature and the cook time and make it all just delicious in the can. You'll see these typical cans that you see all over the place. These are ball, I think, pint jars here that we got going, so we'll be using that. One thing that you do have to remember with the jars and lids themselves is typically these are only single-use lids. So all these lids have a little seal here, and that seal does need to be in contact with the lid 100%, or the rim of the jar 100%, in order to properly seal the jar and make sure everything's fully cooked and is not going to spoil later. So these are really cheap to buy at the store. You can buy them in like different size packs, and you just want to make sure you're using new lids every time. You'll also want to check the rims of your jars to make sure that they're not chipped or cracked or anything that's going to prevent that seal from being in 100% contact around the rim of the jar.
One question, Bradley. Someone who doesn't know anything about canning. I can see these have like a dimple in them. Does that serve a purpose?
Absolutely. So when it's just sitting here, you have this little dimple, right? And you can push it in and out. So once it's properly pressure cooked, and then once it cools down, it actually creates a vacuum inside of the jar, and it'll suck that lid down.
Okay.
So that's how you know it's properly 100% sealed, and you're not going to have any issues. If you're all done, the jars have cooled down, and you can do that with it. For some reason, the seal has failed, and that's going to be a no-go scenario for that jar.
Okay.
Great question. All right. So in terms of prepping the bear meat, this is actually probably the simplest part of the process. You can kind of do this really any way that you like, but the easiest is just cut the bear meat up into like 1-inch cubes.
Okay.
You fill the jar, maybe leave like an inch and a half of space at the top of the jar, and then fill that with the meat, throw in whatever seasonings you like. I've done it with just salt, and that's really good. So you can do salt, pepper, garlic, just whatever. Some people throw jalapenos and just get crazy with it. So anything that you like can go in the jar, and you can rock with that. I think for today, just because we want to create like a nice, easy base, we're just going to go salt only. Okay. And that'll give us just the most sort of I guess, options once we actually want to use this in the process. So once you're using your canned bear meat, you can make tacos, you can make sandwiches like we're gonna make. You can make it like a pot roast style. There's all different kinds of directions that you can go. And so just by using the salt and nothing else, that gives us options like once we're actually cooking whatever dish to get crazy at that point in time. So I think at this point we'll just start prepping the meat and then get it into the jars, and then we'll talk through actually getting it into the canner and all that process here in a minute once we got our jars filled.
Do you have to worry about cleaning up all this stuff?
Yeah.
Like you want it to look really pretty?
Yeah, so it's like it doesn't have to be like, let's call it grocery store level of cleanup on this, but we will remove some of this extra silver skin here. Okay. A little bit, like a couple of these pieces have just a little bit extra on there, like this piece and that piece can probably just get cut up and ready to go. Okay. But we will prep this up a little bit more, get it cut up into cubes, get it in the jars, and go from there.
Okay.
Cool. So just kind of prepping the cans a little bit. We got a few smaller ones, a few bigger ones. What we're doing right now is I've filled up a bowl with pretty hot water, and we're letting the lids soak in there for a minute. Helps kind of soften up that seal a little bit. So once we get it onto the jar, get that lid tightened down, it should be good to go, and we should get a really nice seal. So got a little bit of water here in the pressure canner. So in this kind of typical scenario, we'll have a bunch of these cans, and we'll probably want the water line in the canner to be kind of halfway up these jars roughly. We'll have some of the bigger jars in there as well. Basically we need enough water in the pressure canner itself. Basically what's going to happen is that water is going to boil, create steam, and that buildup of steam inside of the pressure canner is going to create that pressure. So we need enough water to create enough steam to create the pressure that we want, but we don't want too much water to be like overflowing on top of the jars or anything like that. So that's what we're working on now. Getting just about done with the meat. We'll get it in the jars and we'll be good to go. Cool, so we got the meat all cut up into roughly 1-inch cubes. We're gonna get it into the jar, like I said before. Probably leave about an inch and a half space there at the top of the jar. And then basically for this run here, we're just gonna use a little bit of salt, and that's it. So
this is specific salt.
No, so this is canning and pickling salt, but technically it's really just salt.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to use like a seasoning salt or something like that, that would be an option. In the case of like pickling, you're going to add vinegar and other things to get the pickling effect. So in this case, we can just add a little bit of salt. That's what we got. Okay. It'll be perfectly fine. Like I said, in other cases, whatever other seasonings you want, if you want to have specific things. But for our purposes, we're basically just creating a baseline of a nice, quick, and easy jar of canned bear meat that we can use for whatever purpose. So for us this week at the Hunt League On Point Experience, we're going to be making bear cheesesteak sandwiches, not Philly cheesesteaks. Semantics. I'm not a big semantics guy, but there's people out there on the internet that have a hard on for Philly cheesesteak. We're not doing Philly cheesesteaks, people. Okay. We're doing a cheesesteak.
And for those of us that may want to put stuff in there, is there a certain ratio that you're supposed to abide by? Like, I would probably put hatch green chilies in with mine. Would you do like a certain ratio, or is it just personal taste?
Honestly, there's people out there that are going to say, oh, you need a teaspoon of this, you need a quarter, whatever of that. I'm a person that likes to cook mostly just by feel and taste, right? So like, as a rough guideline for a jar about this size, maybe a teaspoon of salt on top of the meat after you've put the meat in the jar would be a good starting point. You can always add more seasoning later, right? You can't really take seasoning away after the fact. Yeah. So when in doubt, less seasoning during the canning process. You can always add more later.
Okay.
So yeah, let's just get the stuff in these jars, and then we'll get the salt in there.
Okay.
Cool.
said like about an inch?
About an inch roughly.
Like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll cook down a little bit during the canning process. You just want to make sure it's not over full and just leave yourself a little bit of room to work.
What happens if you put too much?
Honestly, I'm not 100% sure, but I know I don't really want to find out.
I trust you.
Now, obviously, if you're handling bear meat, you do need to be concerned about the trichinosis that you're getting from the blood or whatever else on your hands and the meat. So, wash frequently. If you're not using gloves or anything like that, hot water, soap, and just be careful. You don't want to lick your fingers. You don't want to touch your eyes, any of that kind of stuff. Just act like if you had some hot jalapeno or habanero pepper oil on your hands, you wouldn't be touching your face or anything like that. So just keep that in mind. All right. So now that we got the meat in to the cans, we just want to make sure that there's like no kind of like meat residue or on the rim of the jar. We also just want to double check just to make sure there's no chips or any gaps or any cracks, anything like that. Basically, once these are under pressure, if there's any kind of little chip, it won't seal correctly. If there's a crack or anything, it's just gonna explode. So I think we're good. So we can add the salt. Shake it like your mama told you. So we're just gonna eyeball. That looks like a couple of teaspoons. That looks pretty good.
And is the salt for flavor or is it for preservation?
Just
how if you're off, how's it going to affect it?
It's mostly just for
flavor.
Flavor. Like, we're basically, by putting the salt in at this point, we're just kind of getting that seasoning in there. It's gonna really absorb through the pressure cooking process. It's like, basically, if you ever done like a slow cooker kind of thing where you just put a big hunk of meat in your slow cooker and let it cook for 12, 16 hours.
Yeah.
This is essentially the same process, but it's happening, instead of like 16 hours, it's happening in an hour and a half through that pressure process. So
you're not trying to recreate a salt cure or something
right,
like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So just a little bit of salt in each one, and we're good to go. So then we're going to be throwing on these lids. And those will just set right on there. And again, we put them in that warm water just to soften up that rubber gasket a tiny bit, so we get a really nice seal.
How important is it for it to be like completely centered, or will
it'll kind of self-center, okay. As you get the doohickey on there, whatever it's called. I don't know what the technical term for this thing is. Yeah, the ring. So then, just screw it on. Tight
or loose?
Well, if you like really wrench on it, it'll like it'll pass the thread.
So just
that's probably fine.
Just snug.
Yeah, just nice and snug. All right, let's talk a little bit about the pressure canner and this process over here. So we got about 2-3 inches of water here that's been heating up in the pressure canner. There is a little bit of a base plate that goes in here that you can take in and out. Your cans will sit on top of that. You definitely need that piece in there when you're going through this process, so make sure it's in there before you're doing add the water, heating it up, and all that good stuff. Really important, you always want to check your valve here, make sure there's no obstructions. Double check your seal, make sure it's all good, it's not rotten, anything like that. Any of those kinds of things can cause issues. And then when you're using this apparatus, read the manual. Just read the manual. It can explode if you do it improperly. That's just, we'll put it that way. So you don't want that to happen. It'll be a hot bomb of hot water. It's just no fun. So read the instructions, make sure you double check all those things and get this thing seated properly. We'll go through all that. All right, so one additional step we can take here, just kind of for safety, make sure everything's working right. We're gonna get a little bit of vegetable oil, just kind of throw it on our paper towel here, and we're gonna just kind of lightly coat the rubber seal around here just to make sure everything's nice and lubricated. And that way, kind of keeps the seal in good condition and make sure we don't have any catastrophic failures. If you do notice like your seal is dry, cracked, anything like that, it's advisable to get it replaced. So just a little bit of vegetable oil will do the job there. And then in order to avoid water stains on our jars, we're gonna toss just a couple tablespoons of white vinegar into the water, and we're all set there. So water's heating up, we can get our jars in.
Is there do you stack them? Do you just touch them?
So basically you want to have just a little bit of space in between each jar as they go in. All right, so now we got the jars in the canner. We got the water heating up. It's on high. Get the lid on. Typically these things have some kind of indicator as to like how to align it up and put it on appropriately, so you want to make sure you follow that. And just like that. So now that it's all closed up, we're going to be leaving it on high until it starts to steam out of this little vent here. Once it's up to temperature and steaming and we know it's building steam, we'll throw it on our weight. I forget exactly what this thing is called.
It's a weight.
Yeah.
A weightometer.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, once the steam's coming up, this weight will keep it sealed until it gets to the appropriate pressure, and then it'll let some air and steam out just so it maintains that pressure, and we'll basically control what pressure we're at with the temperature controls on the stove. So for now, we'll let it come up to temp. Once it starts steaming, we'll drop this guy on, and then for us and where we're at, we'll be cooking everything at about 11 pounds of pressure here on the dial. That might change depending on your elevation, just like a lot of other cooking kind of instructions. Your manual will let you know kind of what that needs to be at certain elevations. So definitely double check that. There are specific instructions for higher pressures and that sort of thing if it's needed. So important to follow those instructions. But about 11 pounds will be good enough for us. So, and then your cook times are really important too. So we want to make sure this cooks for 90 minutes.
Once it reaches
It reaches pressure, okay. Exactly. So a lot of people will make the mistake of, okay, it's here, I threw on the thing or whatever, and now I'm starting the timer. No, it's like once it's up to pressure, you want 90 minutes at that pressure.
Okay.
So we're going to let it work its magic, and then we'll come back. All right, as you can see, we got some steam building up finally, and it's coming out of the vents. So we're gonna get our topper on, and it just drops right on. And then basically now it's in the process of building enough pressure to completely seal. So we've got this vent sealed, and then there's a little pop-up seal that's gonna, once there's enough pressure built up, that'll pop up and completely seal. Then there shouldn't be any steam escaping after that point, and we just saw it pop up. So now we'll start to build pressure, and you'll see it on the gauge as it continues to build. We're gonna leave it on high and build the pressure. Once we get to 11 PSI on the gauge, we'll reduce the heat to maintain that pressure. And then once we're at 11, that's when the timer for 90 minutes starts. So even though pressure's building now, we don't start the timer until we get up to the proper pressure. So once we're at 11, then we'll turn the heat down a little bit, make sure we are maintaining and not going too high. All right, so yeah, we're creeping up here. We're already past 11, so we're gonna turn down the heat. It'll take a little bit of time just to dial it in so it's not increasing too much, not dropping too much, but just keep adjusting your temperature until you kind of get that nice steady state around 11 pounds. And since we're up to temp, we're going to start the timer 90 minutes, let it run, and once timer's expired, We'll turn off the heat, let it cool down, get it off the hot surface, let it cool down, let the pressure dump kind of on its own. You definitely do not want to try to open this thing up while it's under pressure. Absolutely not. So just turn it off, get it off the heat, let it cool down, let that pressure drop. Once it's at 0, then you can open up the lid and get the cans out. So we'll come back once we're done 90 minutes and go through that process and show you how it goes. All right, Cody, well, timer went off finally, so we're at 90 minutes. This thing's been cooking at the 11 pounds of pressure.
Okay.
So basically at this point, we're just gonna turn it off. We're gonna very carefully slide this over to the cool side of the stove. And at this point, we just wanna let it sit. We just wanna let that pressure bleed off on its own. Technically, yes, you could remove this and vent, but you know, you might get a steam burn or something crazy like that. So just let it cool off on its own. Once the pressure's down to 0, then you can open it up and take out the jars.
Okay.
Very handy to have this nifty jar lifter thing because the jars are going to be hot. So this thing will let you grab the jars, pull them out, set them on a nice little towel here so it's not on a hard surface, and it'll finish that vacuum seal on there. So that's it. That's the process. Start to finish canning. It's a great way to do your bear meat, any game meat really. Even if you see a deal at Costco on a big old piece of beef or whatever, it's just a great tool to have in your toolbox. And man, like so far the bear meat that I've done this way been super tasty. Like I said, using it in tacos, using it for sandwiches, you use it as like a roast kind of scenario. So very versatile and a great way of doing it. So
yeah, I'm excited to try these cheesesteak sandwiches.
Yeah, get these cheesesteaks rolling in a couple days here, and man, we'll be eating good.
Sounds good.
All right, we're back. It's finally time. We've been very patiently waiting for this thing to get all the way down to 0 pounds of pressure.
Yes, we have.
We've got the cap off. There's no more steam coming out. It's at 0, so we know it should be good to go ahead and take the lid off without causing a mess.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let's get in here and do it. On the lids of these things, it'll show you like close with arrows one way and open with arrows the other way. So, just follow the instructions and you should be good to go.
See all these juices in here? It's just from the meat.
Oh, another pop.
That's crazy. Oh.
So yeah, if you can hear that sound, that's the sound of that poppy lid actually sealing down. And that means we got good seal around the rim. It's created that good vacuum. And so at that point, we're basically real solid and it's going to be shelf stable.
Nice.
Just sitting there. So yeah, at this point we can get in here and get some of these guys out.
That's so insane. All those juices came out of that meat.
Yeah. So if you remember, right, we put them in dry. We didn't add any liquid in there, and it's basically full of just amazing juice.
Crazy.
Everything cooked to perfection. So we'll just set them down here on this.
Just blows my mind. Then you can like set that on the pantry and just leave it for a long time.
All right.
It looks delicious.
Oh yeah. Cool. So it looks like we got good seals on all of them. So if you were to still feel that popping, if you were able to push it down and have it pop back up and make that sound, then you would know you didn't get a good seal on there.
Okay.
And then in that case, the meat's still cooked, so you could use that meat today,
Just
tomorrow, in a couple days, but it's not going to be able to sit there on your shelf.
Okay.
So from here, you know, you can write right on the lid. A lot of people will put, you know, tape right on whatever you want to do just to make sure you remember what you got. And then from here, man, it's like whatever recipes you want to start making. You know, like I said, whatever. Yeah, we're gonna be doing the sandwiches, tacos. It's all just. Oh, man, I made some bear nachos with canned bear meat. Just heated up a little bit in the skillet, and then had, you know, the chips, little cheese. Oh man, there's like so many good ways you can just do whatever you want to do. So super exciting. And it's like, you know, it takes a little bit of time, but it's not like super crazy amount of difficulty or you know.
It's the same as processing it and grinding it and stuffing it. And yeah,
it
all takes time.
Another part of the process, another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah,
and I mean, again, the results are so tasty. So
and you know for sure that it's safe too.
Yeah, 100%.
Which for me. It's huge,
right?
So I will definitely be doing a lot of this.
Yeah, exactly, right. So if you've been a person that's out there that's, you know, hunted bear, but you're never really sure about the meat, if you haven't really taken the time and invested in, you know, figuring out the process, this is such a simple way of, you know, making sure you're taking advantage of all that great meat from that animal that you've taken. And doing it in a safe way that's also just absolutely delicious. So you kind of check all the boxes with this process. Very versatile, and lots of things you can do with this end result. And man, you get, you know, to really enjoy the rest of the side of, you know, versus being out there on the adventure of the hunt. And you get all this great meat and,
it brings it full circle.
So, yeah, absolutely.
Looks good.
All right, well, we're going to wrap it up here for the evening, and we'll be back out on the hunt tomorrow, and then we'll be back cooking this up for some sandwiches here very soon, so stay tuned. We'll be back with the sandwiches.
Well, this is the cheesesteak you canned, right?
Yeah, I did. I put this sucker together.
Let's go.
Bradley put it together. I just helped make the sound work.
Oh man, that's looking good.
I mean, I'm eating Philly cheesesteak too.
Get that full taste
I'll be
in.
making that at home.
Let's
I can
go.
most of my bear, and that's good.
That used to be my wilderness.
You know, it kind of surprised me. It smells,
whatever miles and eat SpaghettiOs.
tastes just like it smells. Like when you're canning it.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's got that same kind of smell. It'll be delicious though.
Yeah? Did you already get a bite?
Oh yeah.
Any good?
10 out of 10 would
Nick,
recommend.
let's hear it. Let's see it.
That's delicious.
Flamin' hot Cheetos.
Oh, dude, we got flaming hot. Sick.
Oh, that's a man bite right there.
That's good stuff. Yeah, I'll be making more of that at home. You're drilling a little bit there, bro.
It's okay. This is bear nature.
Thank you, Bradley. Thank you, ma'am. It's delicious.
Never had those.
I just hope everybody likes it. It's a little bit of a made-up situation here. You know, we're just rolling with the bear meat that we canned the other day. Throwing some of the goodness on there. We got the onions, bell peppers, American cheese, provolone cheese, bear cheesesteak. That's it.
Consensus is it's delicious.
All right. Cookbook coming soon.